We have connection. Pushing live.
Welcome to Truth Wanted. We search for proof of gods, ghosts, aliens, or any other questionable claims, but we haven't found any yet. Do you have the evidence we've been looking for? Well, then call us because the show is starting right now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host today, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. If you want to call us, you can do that right now. The number is 512-991-9242, or you can call through your computer at tiny.cc/call-TW. And of course, I have to mention Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And of course, every week I always try to have a special guest, and this week is no different. It is Jimmy Jr. joining me today. Jimmy Jr., welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Awesome to be here in the presence of greatness with Objectively Dan himself.
Whatever.
I feel like a new man.
Jimmy Jr., we are going to get into our question of the, not question of the week, our We Want the Truth segment, where we ask some folks about, our question, and we get our top 3 answers. But Jimmy, before we get into that, can you briefly tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Well, first and foremost, I am a husband and a father. I have a beautiful wife, 2 great kids. But I am a military veteran. I am a former Lutheran. I have a background in history and international relations for my education, and I am an educator. And so I am just here to maybe change somebody's life, because when I tuned in to the ACA a decade and a half ago, I said, holy crap, there are people out there that think and act and feel just like I do, and they're talking about it openly.
Yeah.
And so maybe somebody tunes in and sees me and says, you know what, that guy's got it.
Guy.
I'm
Jimmy
here to help.
Jr., he's the one. And now Jimmy's trying to return the favor that the ACA did for him. I'm glad the ACA did that for you, Jimmy. And of course, like Jimmy mentioned, this is a call-in show, so we'd love to talk to you. Our lines are currently open at the moment, and we're going to get to calls in a little bit. But first, we have to talk about our We Want the Truth segment, folks. I'm loving our We Want the Truth answers because they're getting better and better every week. I swear. Last week was really, really funny. I had to miss last week, by the way. I was supposed to host. I had a crazy day at work and I couldn't make it, but luckily Kelly came in and made everything even better with student Dr. Ben. So shout outs to Kelly for doing that last week. But I am here today. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. Last week, our question was, we asked you to invent a useless superpower, really, is what we wanted from you guys. So we picked our top 3 favorite answers. Here is number 3 on the screen here. It's coming from Gruck with 2 Ks, which is great, who says, my useless superpower is to create gold somewhere in the universe. And I love that. That's great, because I could claim that I have that power right now. And could you really prove me wrong? Right? I could just say, oh, it's somewhere else. It's on Mars right now. Now, I guess if you ask me, could I do it like on Earth? I don't know. I could just refuse, right? I don't know. There's ways you could.
You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything, right? It's my superpower. I do what I want with it,
yeah.
Right? Unless we create like an X-Men scenario where the government is trying to like track me down for my powers and other, people with abilities. But that's a whole thing. So let's get to our second answer here. Our number 2 answer is from Amit Matthew, who says, my useless superpower, the ability to accurately predict the outcome of an unbiased coin toss exactly 50% of the time, which is awesome. What a great way to word that. I mean, technically, isn't that a power we already have, right? Can we, right?
I think so. Yeah. Well, I think coins are slightly weighted differently, but for the most part, you get 50-50.
Well, no, actually, here's the thing. What might make his power super in that it's always 50%, right?
Yeah.
He's always wrong half the time. Like, because some people they may get it right 55% of the time or 45%. He's always 50. So that's interesting. Don't know what you do with that, but there's something to it. Great, great answers, guys. But we have to go with our number one answer this week. If we're gonna give that to you now, it's from Alexander KTN, who says, "My useless superpower to always know exactly what to say in conversations, but a day later," which is great. I mean, like, I wonder, do you include email conversations in this? Because, if you have a conversation through email and then you know what to say a day later, that could be useful. But if it's just like through spoken word, yeah, maybe it's not going to help you. I don't know.
I think my superpower is knowing what I should have said on the show 30 minutes after the show is
Right.
over. That's
Which
definitely going to happen today.
that's going to happen to you. Literally, everybody who's ever been on a call-in show as a guest or host has had that feeling.
Yeah.
Everyone has always said to themselves, "Oh, I should have responded this way." It's that classic. If you've ever gotten into an argument with somebody and you're in the shower and you're like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
want to say this."
Yep.
Look, folks. Every host has done this. Every host has talked to other hosts and said, "I wish I had said this." It just doesn't go away. It is always the case. So anyways, thank you guys so much for your answers. Loving this segment. The prompt for this week, go ahead and write it in the comments below. Wrong answers only. What is the real cause of climate change? I love this question. I can't wait to see people's answers to this. But before we move on here, Jimmy, what would you say your answer is to our question this week?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it's a chain reaction. I blame space junk, right?
Space
The
junk.
sun, it's a combination. The sun is hitting all the space junk. It's being reflected down to the earth. It's heating up the earth's surface, right? And cows can't just stand there anymore all day, right? Bovine creatures, gets really hot. And so they can't just be puckered up. They're getting more lazy. They're laying down. They're letting out more methane emissions. And that in turn is making it more hot. So we have to do something about the space junk, save the cows. Their farts are heating up the atmosphere.
I see. I think here's my answer. I think it's a secret conspiracy by penguins. Penguins are really tired of us making documentaries and like invading their territory and stuff. Like 2007 was a crazy year because you had like Happy Feet and also like that one Morgan Freeman movie about the penguins, March of the Penguins. I don't know. Something around that time we fell in love with penguins, and I think they've upped their game, like continue like they want us to care about climate change so that we can make their homes bigger. That's what I think is really going on. So, it's kind of, you ever seen Madagascar?
Oh yeah.
It's like the penguins in that movie. They're all actually like that in real life. So that's my
Let's hope they don't team up with the cows.
Yeah. Could be a big
hot.
deal. Yeah. Could be a big deal. But anyway, thanks so much, guys, for your answers. Looking forward to your answers for this week. But now it's time I get to talk to you, Jimmy Jr. Jimmy Jr., you are a husband, a father, as you mentioned, also veteran, also educator. And you have a story as far as your beliefs. I think your story is a bit different from a lot of people's stories. Of course, everybody's story is unique in some regard. We often find similarities, but I think yours is pretty different from a lot of people. So I'd love for you to talk about a bit about how you went from your Lutheran sort of upbringing, your background, to where you are today.
Yeah, it wasn't overnight. It was a struggle. I think I was about 9 years old when I realized that none of this stuff makes sense that I was being taught. I was up in church because you got the privilege of going upstairs with the adults to be in church, and they told this story about Jesus taking the souls out of a group of people and putting it into a herd of pigs and running them over the cliff. And I was like, what did these pigs do? And it just didn't make sense to me. Right. And that I think was a turning point for me. But more importantly, none of these behaviors, none of this education was really reinforced in my household. Right. We were brought to church and Sunday school, and then that was it. The Christianity was over after that hour a week. And so, there was a lack of consistency, and it really kind of caused me to look in other areas for, well, the truth.
Yeah.
So I think I struggled with it for quite a while. I mean, I was 9 years old, I think, when I started to realize it, and then by the time I was 27, I was a full out atheist.
Yeah.
And so it was a long and winding road. I think leaving for the military helped me. You know, I traveled the world. I met different cultures, people of different religions. Even on my very first base, or even in basic training, I met all kinds of different people.
Yeah.
And I had never really left home before. So that it just kind of reinforced things. And then, you know, in my search for what it was that I truly believed, I stumbled upon the ACA. And like I said earlier, wow, like I never had conversations like this before. And there was a whole community of people out there. And I just felt so comforted. I felt like I was not alone anymore. And I kind of just went from there. So it's been awesome.
Yeah.
It's been awesome. I feel very lucky.
You talk about some of those experiences that you had while you were abroad. What were some of those experiences like that made you kind of question things?
Well, I would say in Afghanistan, this may seem so insignificant, but for me it wasn't. I was rubbing sunblock on my arms, and an Afghan man came up to me and kind of put his hands out and asked me to put sunblock on him. And he wasn't, you know, the person that I had been programmed to think he was. You know, he was just another human. He was different from me. He grew up different from me. But at that same time, we both needed the same thing, right? We both wanted the same thing, and we bonded. You know, it was a split second, right? And it was a moment that had never occurred to me before. And maybe that I haven't had since, because it was the first one and very profound. But I look at people differently, because I think I really didn't have a lot of exposure to different cultures. Now, I grew up in New York, and you might say, wow, somebody from New York doesn't have exposure to different cultures, but it's quite different when you leave the country and you experience people who live by a different set of rules, beliefs. Everything they know is different from you.
Sure.
And so that was quite interesting. And then, you know, I came across all kinds of people in those capacities, people from Nepal or the Pacific Islands, or, you know, and, you know, they all had things that were important to them that didn't matter to me ever. And so it was kind of just an awakening, you know, over and over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting that you talk about your experience there in Afghanistan. I just as a aside, I've heard other people talk about when they were deployed, you know, out in that area. Like, I've heard stories of other veterans who have said, like, "Oh, I didn't when was exposed to this other culture. This was like the first time I got to travel abroad. Like, this is the first. I don't know if that was your experience, but it's a lot of people. It's like, oh, this is my first time meeting people outside
Yeah.
of the United States." And of course, during that time, of course, there was a lot of, shall we say, inferences about people from the Middle East, who, you know, let's face it, a lot of bigotry that was happening in this country at the time towards people of a certain skin tone, of a certain religion, and it's from veterans that I've heard who've been the most responsive towards Muslims and responsive towards people, you know, Iraqi and Afghanistan, from the Afghanistan area, who are the most responsive, although because they've had that some of those cultural experiences. I don't know. You're making that connection with me right now in my mind from what I've heard from other people, which is interesting.
Yeah, you know, they're just
yeah.
out there trying to do the best they can with what
Yeah.
they have. And aren't we all doing that?
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
So it's a very, very human experience.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think that changes when people actually do get to travel, or people actually do get to meet people from other cultures. That does kind of open people's eyes, especially for Americans. I mean, again, I'm harping on this, but it's like most Americans. I think this. I can't remember the statistics, but over half of Americans haven't traveled outside the country. I believe is what's current in the population right now, which is like that's sad. I think for a country that is as prosperous as we are in so many ways, it's like we don't get to experience that, and I think that does limit our views and some of our biases there. So what were some other like kind of moments? Because you said this was a long journey for you. What were some other aha moments for you that got to where you are today?
One profound experience I had was when I was invited on a camping trip. Right. And now I was new to the military at that time, and I was kind of making friends with people in the barracks or on the base I was living. And there was this group that would always get together, and we never talked about the Bible or anything. We would kind of drink on the weekends and order pizza and stuff. And so I got invited on a camping trip, and I went on this camping trip, and it was a retreat. And there I was, somebody who was like on the verge of atheism, like discovering, that this is who I am. And I was around a campfire with people asking me, if I get angry, do I give the devil a foothold on my soul? And it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable, but it was kind of a look into how I needed to be tricked in order to go along with it, And in my opinion, I'm not here to disparage anyone's beliefs or religion per se. I don't want to take it away from them if it's something that makes their lives better. But for me, I think that there is a connection with people kind of being tricked or lied to when it comes to religion, throughout the Middle Ages, that was the case. I mean, you couldn't get an English copy of the Bible, right? Everything was in Latin, but you all spoke, your native language. So that was very eye-opening. I was like, wow, this would not have happened had I not been lied to about the purpose, the intent of why we were getting together. But
what do you think you were
another one?
What do you think you were lied to about specifically?
I think I was shielded from the fact that we were going on a religious retreat. I mean, that was not brought up at all.
Okay.
It was like, hey, you got a tent? Oh yeah, I'll go get one, and we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Get some water shoes, there's a river. All right, cool. Yeah, sounds good. We'll get some firewood. And then somebody hands out this paper of this list of questions about, how do you best serve God? And I was like, whoa, man, what are we doing here? Like,
I didn't sign up for that. Yeah.
So I don't know. That was kind of something I always think back about. Otherwise they were okay. Those people were okay. I had a lot of fun with them, but
So
I had to move on.
And there are some people who approach religion and they say, and I think you kind of alluded to this, where it was like, oh, if it works for you, it works for you, whatever. And there's others who say, no, we should get rid of this thing entirely. These any supernatural beliefs, any beliefs we can't prove. Like where are you on this spectrum in terms of, are you a kind of let live kind of person, or are you we need to like eradicate all these bad ideas off the face of the planet? Where are you at?
I think that is an unlikely scenario that we're ever going to eradicate anything. Just history, historically speaking, and even in my own lifetime, I don't think that we're ever going to see that happen. But religion serves as a crutch for people. I mean, let's face it. Sometimes people need it, right? It helps people with addiction. It can do wonders for people. It's not going to work for me. It's not something I'll teach my children. And I would like to make sure that while I think people have the right to worship or believe what they want to believe, they need to keep that out of the government and out of legislation and away from the public eye or in the public sphere. And that's something that I believe strongly. I also think that while we probably will not get rid of religion completely, we can inspire change within it. Why are people giving money to an organization that protects child molesters, or an organization that thinks women are unequal? And how are you a woman that gives money or supports an organization that thinks you are lesser than the men in that same organization? How do you let that happen? And that would be my question to female theists.
Listen,
I don't believe women are unequal at all. You're talking to the guy that wrote his master's thesis on equal rights for women that was caused by religion. So
I was going to
unequal rights.
It's so funny because I was going to go into this topic last week with student Dr. Ben. I found this genre of people on Twitter, and it's like women who are like super pro patriarchy. And it's very, very fascinating. Obviously, there's evangelical ties in a lot of that. They believe in like biblically based roles for women, but they're the ones who are like, yeah, I should be in the kitchen making sandwiches for my husband and stuff. And they garner this influence doing that. And I just want last week I wanted to talk about that phenomenon, because I was just like, I don't know what I'm a man. I've never been a woman. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. That is just to me, that's mind blowing. I don't know how
Mhm.
you go that far. There's some people who internalize those beliefs and don't necessarily like, have a full thesis about it. But these people like build their whole identity on Twitter around this thing. I was gonna read some tweets from it. It was interesting thing, but yeah, very, very interesting how these ideas can be religiously motivated, right?
Mhm.
Can
Mhm.
give you this sort of security.
Indoctrination is very powerful. It's very
Mm.
powerful.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we most of us don't escape it, right?
Mhm.
We experience it in some way, and I think that sometimes even I have, some leftover tendencies for my mind to go, "Oh, Grandpa's watching me" or something for a split
Mm.
second, even if it's for a split second, and then I have
Mm.
to snap out of it,
Yeah.
because for a long time, I'm 40 years old, for more than half my life, I thought those things,
Yeah.
so it's just a difficult thing to
It
shed.
could be a habit for a lot of
Yeah,
people. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, folks, if you think that we're indoctrinated, or if you think that you might have been indoctrinated, or any other kind of thing, this is Truth Wanted. We talk about a lot of stuff. Please call into the show. We have some open lines, and we want to get to some calls here in just a second. We'd love to talk to you today. But before we get to that, Jimmy, I have a quick shout out I need to give. We have a super chat, folks. We are doing the super chat stuff now, and we will read them out loud on the show. We have one from Anton Gomez, who gave 130 pesos. I'm not sure how much that is in American dollars, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Thank you so much, Anton. And Anton says, Dan, as you may or may not know, it was Ramadan not long ago. Did you get rammed? I hope you are amongst one of the Dans that survived unrammed. Cheers. I don't know what that means, to be quite honest with you. I'm not as I guess I should be more familiar with Ramadan, but I don't know. I don't know what it means to get rammed in that sense. So maybe
I've
somebody
never
in
heard
the
of the two
chat can
being
tell
linked.
me about that. I Ram. Is it Ramadan? Is that supposed to be like a pun on my name? Is that what's going on? Anyway, but yeah, Ramadan would be that's my new
Clever.
holiday actually. We should celebrate Ramadan and figure out what day that is. I don't know, but I'll come up with the rules for that later. For now, I also need to give a shout out to the patron of the week because every single week we always give a shout out to the folks on Patreon. Thank you to everybody who donates on that Patreon. It's tiny.cc/Patreon TW. But of course, this week's patron of the week is going to be Lauren Z. Thank you so much, Lauren Z. Really appreciate you donating and being a supporter of the show. So thank you to everybody, of course, that donates on that Patreon. You guys rock. And now that we have that out of the way, I think we can go ahead and get to some calls. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, I think that's good. Dan, do you mind if I just give a quick shameless plug real
Yeah.
quick?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right,
And
cool.
we'll give you a chance to plug at the end as well, but I know you wanted to talk about this a bit, so you can talk about it right now.
I really do, and I'm going to make it quick, and I
Yeah.
promise you. But I'm not here. So I mentioned I have a military background, military service, and I just wanted to let other military and veterans know that there is an organization out there that has resources for you if you don't want to find certain resources through more non-secular means. For example, if there's a chaplain out there that you don't want to speak to because they're religious, first and foremost, I can tell you from experience, I think that they're not going to proselytize to you. They want to help you. They don't want to try and convert you. But if that's still not good enough, they can point you in the right direction. However, there is also the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, and we'll throw up some information on that at the end. But make sure that you know those resources and that you can reach out to them, especially in instances of mental health or, where getting help is concerned, because we don't want anything to happen to you. So
Yeah.
that was my quick plug. I wanted to throw that out there.
course.
I'm not here again as a representative of that organization, but I do think that I just wanted to take the time to mention it. Thanks.
Yeah. That's great, of course. Thanks, Jimmy. Of course, people often talk about the old "there are no atheists in foxholes" argument. And I'm really glad the internet exists just so people can prove that wrong like over and over and over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again, right? It's like, man, I don't know why that association is there. Somehow, if you've seen, first of all, most people deployed haven't seen combat, but those who have seen combat, even like, still a lot of them aren't believers. I don't know where that idea comes from, but that's out there. So very very glad that there are organizations that deal specifically with issues that someone with your experience would can get something out of that somebody like me can't can't deliver on, right? So thanks for plugging that, and let's go ahead and
Yeah.
get to our first call here. We've got Chase, who is calling in from Idaho. Chase, you're our first call for tonight on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey guys, thanks for having my call. Thanks for taking my call. I got a topic I'm hoping to talk about: the environmental benefits of a plant-based diet.
Yeah, so I see, obviously, Chase, I think you probably know my position on this. I do identify as a vegan. I've been doing that since 2020, in part because of this show. I think a lot of vegans have challenged me on this notion, and I think a plant-based diet has a lot of ancient roots and, of course, a lot of benefits. Of course, you can find benefits to pretty much any diet. That's the problem with, first of all, health sciences. If we're talking about sciences in general, is the most maligned science out there. And what I mean by that is it is the most industry motivated science I think possible. You can find studies for every single diet possible. But like, it's also very hard, there's a lot of people that have different ideas. Experts can't agree on stuff, but regardless, if we're talking about what's best for people and what's best for like the environment, yeah, I don't think you can compare. I do think a plant-based diet, more so than any other kind of diet, kind of wins out of that. Is that your view, Chase?
Yes, it is. I got about 10 statistics to share with you real quick.
Oh my God. Oh don't turn this into like the statistics show, but if you want to give like one or two, I'd be interested in hearing.
Okay, well, from Yale University, it takes 25 calories of plants to make 1 calorie of beef, because the cow has to eat crops for 18 months to get them up to slaughter weight. So that's called a food conversion ratio. So 25 to 1. And you can imagine the amount of land that takes. So that's just one.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you there. My understanding is that most crops produced today actually aren't for direct human consumption. They are actually for livestock. Like, that is just a fact, right? Just because the amount of crops it takes to feed, cows and pigs and all kinds of animals, just ends up taking more than what we consume directly, as a result, which is interesting to think about. So yeah, I can at least I can verify on that front,
Yeah, exactly. And like the University of Oxford is saying that raising animals takes up 75% of our farmland, because again, we have to grow crops to feed all those animals. And and they said that beef required 36 times more land than peas.
Yeah, I believe it. Again, I'm not looking at this directly in front of me, but I mean, that sounds true to what I've seen. Of course, I am the only vegan host at the ACA, as far as I'm aware. Okay, I understand I am the minority, and when I talk about these issues, some people get very annoyed about it. They wonder why. What is the relation when we talk about this? For me, a plant-based diet ties back to ethics. And we talk about ethics in a lot of other categories, right? Like, religion dominates categories of ethics, and I consume a plant-based diet for ethical reasons, which is why I find it to be relevant to the things that we talk about here. So that, for anybody who's wondering why are we talking about this on this show, because that's pretty much the reason why. I do think it falls into a category in which we should talk about. Whether, and if you disagree with me on any of that, that's fine, but like, there's a reason why I hold the views that I do. And Chase, I think we've talked. I think we talked before on Discord. So I think I know your views as well. But Jimmy, I want to give you a chance to chime in. What are your thoughts on plant-based diets in general? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you think they're the worst? What do you think?
No, I think they're really great. We are a majority plant-based household in my household.
Yeah.
So we do consume meat, but we try to stick more to plants or fruits and vegetables. Nuts. But I don't have any disagreement with Chase. I think that the amount of land that is used to foster the development of huge herds of animals to be slaughtered, detracts from the natural environment. It breaks food chains. It breaks natural habitats and the ecosystem. And it also is not really all that healthy. The human body is not really designed to eat as much meat or as we consume on a yearly basis. As far as I can tell, I don't have probably as much statistics as Chase does. But, you know, this idea that, oh, I'm American, you know, I need my steak, that's actually like not even consistent with what our natural diet should be as humans. So no issues there, Chase.
When we get into the natural
point,
I know, like I'm just saying this as a preface, because every time somebody brings up natural diet, everybody always says, "Oh, what's natural? What's this?" You know, it's like, okay, look, even if you bring all that kind of stuff out of it, right? I think you can look at you can make several different arguments, right? Even besides ethics or besides what's best for people. I agree with Chase when we're talking about the environmental stuff, right? Like I still think even if you're a hardcore carnivore, right? Because they're out there and they're growing in numbers, right? These people who want to do these meat-based diets, you cannot convince me that a meat-based diet is going to be more environmentally friendly than a plant-based one on pretty much every level. I mean, obviously there are some crops that are problematic, that you know, you like some tofu and other kinds of stuff, for example, can be like huge strains on water and stuff. You know, there's quibbles and these different things, but again, we bring up this fact that, look, for every cow that gets raised or every pig that gets raised, they have to be fed crops, and that uses arable land that can be used for food that can be made directly for people. So it's like, I don't know, there's and when it comes to climate change, yeah, I think plant-based diets win pretty much. I don't think it's contentious.
Yeah.
You also see dwindling populations of you know, birds and bees and different animals that rely on the natural plant life in that area that's just being cleared for grass to be planted or whatever.
Yeah. Chase, you had something you want to say?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, according to the United Nations, you know, 70% of the rainforest deforestation in the Amazon is to make room for cattle to graze, and then, you know, according to the United Nations, again, 70 billion land animals are fed and killed every year across the world for food that we don't need to eat. 70 billion, that's 10 times the human population. So if we didn't breed those animals into existence, then we would free up so much land that we could then plant more trees to sequester the carbon emissions from our cars and everything, you know. But yeah, I appreciate your time. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm an activist for animal rights and for human rights and for the environment, and I just encourage everybody to take this stuff seriously, you know, because there's a lot of different ways that we can make an impact on the world, and part of it is through our consumer habits, through these mass economic boycotts. You know, it's not just one person, you know, stuck thinking like they got no power, because we're working together. You know, we're all in this together. And but also we can pressure politicians to change laws, and we can you know, talk to different companies and tell them, hey, we want you to sell this product instead, and that kind of thing. Yeah,
I appreciate it, Chase. Thanks. You're actually fairly short when it came to time there, so I appreciate your brevity on that. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I broadly agree with what Chase has to say. You know, and again, I understand. When I talk about animal ethics, I'm usually the minority in the room when it comes to this stuff, and this is an opinion that I've had to cultivate over the years since I've been a host. When I first started hosting, I did not have the same views and ideas that I do now, but probably in part when I talk about animal ethics, I talk about it in the same vein that I talk about racism, in the same vein that I talk about homophobia or transphobia. That this is just as important to me as other human rights issues, because animal rights issues do become human rights issues in a very real way. And unfortunately, in my experience, those conversations tend to make people, especially even in this space, which is a space which we like to say that we're open-minded and that we're open to, you know, critically thinking about stuff. I think it makes people uncomfortable. It certainly made me uncomfortable when first presented this stuff, because again, this isn't like the typical atheist talking point, but I think it is something that we are going to talk about more and more as years go on. And I'm going to be the guy that says, you know what, I've been talking about this for a while. I'm going to be saying that 5 years from now, I hope. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Jimmy, did you have any more thoughts on that particular issue?
I
Yeah.
agree. I think
Yeah.
it's related to
Yeah.
atheist talking points, though,
Yeah.
you know, because it challenges a traditional mindset that people don't really give a lot of attention to.
Yeah.
You know, if you challenge somebody on maybe what they believe, there's really no difference. You know,
Mhm.
they believe that they're supposed to be meat eaters, consuming, you know, large portions of meat throughout their life.
Mm.
I mean, how many of us grew up thinking that milk was like the most healthy thing ever,
Yeah.
right? Our
Yeah.
parents rammed milk down our throat, and
Yeah.
we just accepted it.
Yeah.
And, you know, people do the same thing with their religions that they
True.
do with their diets. And, you know, it needs to be challenged. It is a conversation that should excuse me, happen.
I appreciate that, Jimmy, because sometimes I talk about this and people don't like it. But you know what? I'm glad you're okay with that. We do have open lines, folks. So we are waiting for you guys to call in to talk to us. I will say, while we're still talking about this issue, Jimmy, um, there's two topics people say in polite conversation that you shouldn't bring up. One is
Mhm.
politics and one is
Mhm.
religion, right? We've all heard
Mhm.
this. I would propose there is a third category, and it is what people eat and their diets and stuff, right? I find that that's an issue that people are sensitive and rightly so, right? Because what we consume directly affects our health, and talking about people's health in public spaces, oftentimes is very impolite. But even more so than that, it talks about our deeply ingrained beliefs about what we think is right and wrong, right? When we talk about consumer activism, things like that, people tend to kind of, not have the best response to it. I mean, recently we talked about the stuff that was happening with the Harry Potter game with J.K. Rowling. People saying, "Oh, it's unethical if you buy this game." There are big debates about that. What does it mean when you buy a game that a billionaire is just going to make basically what is equivalent to a penny to us off of? Right? It's like it's really hard. When it comes to like the animal rights stuff, again, I do feel passionately about it. I do think it is the right thing to do to eat a plant-based diet, but it's again, I think that my diet and also what I thought about food and animals and treatment of it was in part influenced by religion, at least on some level. There is, of course, the Bible quotes that people bring up that say that all the animals are supposed to be dominion over man, right? And then in the New Testament, all the meats are supposed to be are clean or are made clean for us to eat. So, people bring that up and say, look, we don't have to worry about this, even though if we did really evolve and we did have, an evolutionary timeline that gave us the ability to feel through natural causes, we were probably not the only animals that can feel, especially pain. And I don't believe we are. I think other animals can. Anyway, I'm ranting
Oh,
about this
absolutely.
because I'm waiting for other folks to give us a call. But Jimmy, you feel free to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, challenging a traditional view like that. And
Yeah.
that works to challenge multiple views that people
Mm.
have, you know. So if you're to challenge them on what they eat and what's in the Bible,
Yeah.
that kind of is a lot more maybe brain power or maybe life altering decisions that people
Yeah.
are willing to commit to.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a big chunk to take off of.
It is. It is.
I I understand, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that people kind of have a history of knowing that they're doing something wrong, but they don't have a way to fix it. So they
Mm.
kind of just keep doing it and don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm so hesitant to bring this up because I don't want to seem insensitive. But and I'm not making a comparison to say that they're equal in scale, but
Yeah.
I will say the people who wrote the Constitution, for example,
Yeah.
believed that slavery was immoral,
Yeah.
but they
Well,
still owned and raped their slaves. They
yeah.
still did it.
I was gonna
And
say,
it's
I don't know if all of them believed they were immoral. I mean, most of them were slave owners, right?
yeah. So,
So yeah.
Thomas Jefferson famously said, "There's nothing that we can really do about it right now, but we need to figure it out." And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, well, why don't you do something about it instead of having 13 children with your slaves?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and again, I don't think that there's any worse scar on the history of America than slavery, right? Maybe the slaughter of Native Americans, but I'm not comparing those two either. I don't think that the life of a chicken is equal to the life of a slave. But
No.
what I am saying is that it's not the first time that people have kind of just facilitated this unethical lifestyle and
Sure.
just let it kind of coast by while they try and figure things out. I
No,
don't
I
know.
see what you mean.
Hey,
I hear the comparison you're making, and of course, if people ask me, "Oh, would I save a human life over a chicken?" Of course, I value
yeah,
humans more. That's not the question. I'm not eating people right now. I had the choice to eat other animals, and if I could do otherwise, then why wouldn't I? Is the question. One thing that's interesting to me is, of course, when you see the very slow change. When reading the history of animal ethics, particularly in the law, is quite fascinating because what's legal is unexpected, and how slow some of these recent changes have been made and are still being made is also quite unexpected. Because you have to wonder if there are ethical, if the law even recognizes that there are even ethical and unethical treatments of particular animals. You have to wonder by what degree, why is it different for a livestock than for a dog? If you were to treat a dog in the same way that we treat cows and pigs, you could go to jail, right? There are repercussions for it, but
hmm
you don't go to jail for doing the same things to a cow or pig, and you have to wonder why. If a pig, especially, right? I mean, like you've seen Babe, like they've made they've made live action movies with pigs. They're very smart. They
Yeah.
do things like
Oh, sure.
we do kind of pick and choose, and the truth is, it is based on our culture. We value some animals more than others because some are traditionally valued as companion animals more. And when you really look at the differences there, that's partly a reason why uh, I bring this up to people. It's like, look, if you think treating a dog is the worst thing ever, you pick a dog or you prod a dog with an electric rod or whatever, and you would rightfully be outraged at it. But it's like, look, we do this to other animals all the time. We do quite worse things to other things, and we justify it by saying, well, we're going to eat them at the end of the day. I don't know. It's very, 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 very big topic that I don't always get to talk about. So, Chase, I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to at least like dump it on the surface of, because it is probably one of the deepest topics you can really get into on a show like this, in my opinion, at least from what I know about it. But we finally have some folks who want to talk to us, Jimmy, so I don't have to keep talking about this any longer. So now all the people that hate when I bring up this kind of topic can now rejoice because we're going to be moving on. But before we do, first
I'm happy to talk.
we have a super chat. It's from Katie S, who donates $2 and says, "Is it unethical to eat unfertilized eggs?" Okay, I said we were going to be moving on, but I will respond to this. I mean, if we're talking about chicken eggs, right? There are different vegans that feel differently about this, right? So there's some that say, well, you know, locally raised chickens who are basically raised as companion animals, like you do dogs and cats, can do just fine when you eat their eggs. They actually lay an abundance of eggs because we've basically evolved them to leave that many eggs. That naturally in the wild they didn't do that. That's something that was cultivated over the years, and they lay so much it actually leads to a lot of health problems. So there are some vegans that say, yeah, it's actually fine for those locally sourced eggs. Now the problem is, of course, when you go to the grocery store, you're not buying eggs that are grown that way. At least 99% of the time, right? If you're going to and you're just buying your traditional eggs, it's going to be from factory farms. So there are some vegans that say, well, we can't even actually do that because that's animals' property. Essentially, there's no reason why we should be able to take away an animal. You have to. They would say, well, does a chicken have a right to eat your eggs or eat another animal's eggs, or you get into these weird arguments about, well, wait, what if does an animal have a right to live in your home or to do these things to you? Like, if you don't think so, you have to wonder why a human can do it to other animals. I mean, people say, well, because we're more sentient and stuff, and again, that it goes into the weeds. But the point is, there are some the term for it is escaping me, but basically animal rights activists who say that, look, we can't even interfere with this process. Even this is unethical. Personally, I think if you're on a local farm and you're eating eggs, I don't really care. But the fact is, most of the time, if you're eating eggs at a restaurant, it's not going to be from that. So anyway, that's my quick aside. Now we're going to move on. Okay, we're moving on now. We got some calls. We have two. One from, let's get to Mike. We got Mike from Massachusetts who wants to talk to us about theistic claims of objective morality. Mike, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Awesome.
How about yourself?
Good, thanks. I'm always a little bit just amazed at theistic claims of there being an objective morality based on, say, a scripture, because it just seems like the entire concept on just a purely practical level is ridiculous.
Yeah.
For instance, so we know that as human beings, everything that we read or hear, everything we perceive to some extent goes through our lens that has a subjective element to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that is why two people can read the same passage and come away with different conclusions. They can hear the same. They can hear the same preachment and draw completely different conclusions from it as to its import. Hell, you can even have videotapes of things, and people will say, one person will say, "Oh, I definitely saw this." I mean, I remember one of the most dramatic early demonstrations of this was the Rodney King beating video, where people just like, there's videotape evidence there, and people are coming to wildly different conclusions.
Yes.
So since this is a reality, I don't think this is a controversial thing to say, that to some extent our perceptions are inescapably subjective. So I guess my question would be, if there is this objective reality, how would you transmit it to subjective creatures in a way that those subjective creatures would know objectively what it means?
Yeah. You're Mike. I want to respond to this, and I was talking for a bit, but I'll let Jimmy respond afterwards. Mike, this is a big problem I have with theistic conceptions of morality, especially objective morality. Personally, I'm an anti-realist. I don't particularly believe that there is an objective morality for some of the exact same reasons you've given. Well, particularly a theistically driven one, right? Because we are subjective creatures who interpret everything inherently through our experience. So how can we possibly understand even what it means for an objective route? When we talk about science being an objective process, it's an objective process more or less. But the thing is, we still get things wrong all the time about what we do about it. Science is constantly changing. And we may get a better and better picture. We may have higher fidelity instruments. We may have better techniques and methods, but the point is it's still being done by humans. And that's why we're constantly getting shit wrong all the fucking time. So how can you tell me that some God at some time wrote down at least 10 commandments? There's more than that, but that's another issue. And said, look, this is the deal. Everybody's got to follow this, and you're just fine. The fact is, it's not the case. It never has been the case. Morality is extremely complex. And as you pointed out, as ethical subjectivism, you don't have to actually hold the meta-ethical view, right, that all morality is subjective, to at least make the observation that, look, other cultures have interpreted morality differently over time. And the fact is, they will continue to do it differently. We will never come upon like a universal morality, like as a human species. I don't even think it's possible, right?
Yeah. Have you ever heard a theist even attempt to explain how a definitive universal theistic morality is effectively transmitted to
what they
say, well, it's written on your heart.
It's written on our hearts. They make appeals that
took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. Make appeals that we can't possibly demonstrate, right? That's how you do that. And look, morality could be objective. It could be objective, and we may not be able to access it. That's valid, right? That could be a possibility. But that's not what theists are typically saying. Theists typically say, well, look, yes, it's there, and we do have access to it. It's called the Bible, okay? And also, the Holy Spirit informs your view, et cetera, right? So the point is, we do have access to an objective morality, because what's the point of a morality being objective if we don't have access to it, right? If we don't have access to it, then who cares? So, yeah.
Right. And so, and then, I mean, it seems like the other thing they fall into very often is no true Scotsman fallacy, where somebody says, well, okay, but what about this other Christian who's just as devout as you are, but disagrees, say, with biblical sanctions against killing, thinks that killing is, or, you know, whatever. There are all sorts of, and then of course, well, that's not a real Christian.
Of course, of course. Jimmy, you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I'm the new guy here, you know? I just want to kind of fit in where I can. But yeah, Mike, I think really what it boils down to is that a lot of Christians, when they turn around, or religious, you know, any religion in general, when they profess that they have this idea that morality is kind of consistent, you know, across the board, that's really the indoctrination speaking, right? They don't really have the proof that they would need to substantiate those claims. In fact, they're given the Bible and said, hey, or told, hey, here's the formula that you need. Everybody knows it. If you don't know it, then you get tortured forever. And so when you tell that to a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old and they grow up into a 35-year-old, and that's the only thing they've heard their whole life, well, objective morality is just a way of life, even if it's not real or you know, something that can be tangible in any way. And to answer your second question, I mean, that's just kind of my take on how that comes about, right? It's a way for people in power to cling to power. I have the formula for everybody to be good. Just do what I say. That way, you know, you don't get thrown into the lake of fire. But on your second point, man, I kind of lost where I was going here. You asked, you know, how would you transmit that? Well, what was your second question again, Mike? I'm sorry.
Well, so I was just making the point that so if you say,
excuse me, I'm sorry. You said how would you kind of explain objective morality or something in that way? You know, or how would you what would be like the root or something like that?
There's no mechanism for reliably communicating it to inherently subjective creatures like humans.
But we do have a common foundation, right? We do have a common perception that we don't want certain things to happen to us, right? And we should know by that measure that we probably shouldn't do those things to other people. And, you know, I don't want to jump back on Dan's point, because I think he hammered it home. But, you know, if we're not doing these things to people, why are we doing them to animals, et cetera, you know, and that brings that whole question up. So,
here's a key thing with that.
Maybe where Christianity gets it right is like do unto others, but I can give them credit for that and not much else. And I think that's just the foundation. That now morality will change over time, you know, as we change, as our society adapts to new ways. But for the most part, you know I don't want to get raped or killed or punched in the face for no reason. So I'm not going to do that to other people. And that's just kind of my take on that.
No, yeah, no,
if they limited it to the golden rule, I think we'd be fine. But they have this massive rule book, right?
Right.
It's
right. That they've never read. So you got to cut them a little slack. Well, sort of.
I think, you know, people, you mentioned, Jimmy, this concept of, people have a common foundation for morality, right? And this is often cited as a reason why objective morality is something that exists. And people also cite that we have this idea of moral progress, right? Where it's like, well, you talked about slavery before. In the United States, of course, we've mostly outlawed slavery, except for the prison system. But, you know, we technically never actually said that slavery is illegal. The 13th Amendment is actually a little bit more complicated. But point is, right, like we have this idea of, look, most of us view it as wrong. And so people cite that as, look, that must mean that we are pointing towards something objective. But I want to point out, for people who are confused by this, right, the fact that we have values, human values, doesn't make it objective, right? This is where people, I think, get it confused. I value the principle of the universal consideration of interests, right? I value the perspectives of women. I value the perspectives of racial minorities. I value the perspectives of sexual minorities. I value their perspectives because I value their interests. I want to live in a society that values their interests. And that's why I have the values that I do. It has nothing to do with me being objective. It has everything to me with being a subjective being that has those values. If I didn't have those values, I wouldn't act the way that I do. And so ultimately, that's what informs my moral actions, right? That's what determines my right from wrong. So like I think it's important to point that out, because people do get very confused when you say, well, look, if we have this common foundation, doesn't that make it objective? And no, it doesn't.
No.
It just means that we all have very similar values. Doesn't make it objective. Just means that we all evolved very similarly. And that's just hard for people to wrap their heads around, you know?
And let me don't mistake as a species, right? Don't mistake my words for saying that we have improved. Sure. I think that you'd have a hard time improving that as a species, you know, there has been any moral progress.
Yeah, I'm someone who doesn't think moral progress is a coherent concept, personally. But again, I'm an anti-realist. There's a lot of atheists that disagree with me on that. So again, we're getting into the controversial takes.
Look at something like, okay, so we feel like we're more enlightened, and yet this industrialized world that we've developed in our enlightened age is making the world uninhabitable.
Sure.
We have now social media, which was touted as an unalloyed good 10 years ago, and now we're awash in misinformation. I mean, I agree. I think it's moral progress as a notion is very slippery.
Yes. Well, we have benefits of the modern world and the first world because we exploit the third world. You know, a lot of people don't like using terms first world, third world. I think it's important to recognize, hey, we have those terms for a reason, because we have a world class system that essentially says, well, if you live here, you get all the goods and you get to be paid well and you get to have a 40-hour work week, whereas in other parts of the world you don't. And what determines that? Your birth. That's it. Oh, you want to go somewhere else? You want to go to another country? Oh, you can't. You got to be a citizen. Which is like really crazy, because it's like if you had a kid, Jimmy, I know you have kids. I imagine, Jimmy, you wouldn't let your kids be subject to child marriage, right? Because you think that that's something that they should be able. You shouldn't make that decision for them, first of all, right? You shouldn't be able to say, I think you should marry somebody. You want them to have that decision for themselves, and yet we don't let people live in the countries that they want to live, right? Have the jobs that they want to live, and live. Like, the only reason I get to be in a house right now in America is just because I was born here. That's it. I mean, I work, but you know, it is crazy. The system doesn't make sense. We have moral progress, I think, is an illusion on some regards. I agree with you, Mike.
Yeah. There's a give and take for everything, right? And I think it speaks to kind of what I was talking about before, where we just kind of continue in this system that we know is flawed, and there's really not enough energy devoted. I mean, how many of us have cell phones? Right? How many kids? Do you know that arms are being chopped off and mining operations in Africa are resulting in human slavery and exploitation so that we can get those cell phones?
It's terrible.
I still have my cell phone, and you know, the fact that I can get in touch with my daughter when she's lost or didn't get picked up from school or something, you know, is kind of like, I don't want this phone, but like, I can't leave my kid out there and not be safe, you know? So I make that compromise, and I don't really feel good about it, but I think that all of us deal with that.
There are free trade phones that I've been interested in looking into.
Yes.
You know, it's
I've looked into that, and they're none of them are 100%, but they're making progress, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Anyway, Mike, any last words before we wrap things up?
Just a quick word. You know, on your show and a lot of these shows, you hear from a lot of precepts, and that's another big mystery to me. It's just like, it's true that there's no solution to the problem of hard solipsism, and so. But if your presupposition is, I think I just take it as axiomatic that I exist, I think that is a lot easier to sustain than, oh, there is this mystical being up in the sky who has this ornate set of rules, who does all these things, can suspend laws of, I mean, not all presuppositions are the same.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get asked a lot, Mike, how do you talk to presuppositionalists? What do? Right? People are very interested in this because it's almost like a riddle. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you solve this problem?
Yep.
Well, you can't, because you're trying to solve the problem of hard solipsism. The truth is, pragmatically, most of us try to make as few assumptions as possible, because we seem to operate under this idea that the fewer assumptions that we make, then the less likely we will be to be wrong. Now, that may not actually be true, but that's how most of us operate, right? We tend to think, well, if we assume less things, then we may not be wrong about as many things. And one of these assumptions that presuppositionalists choose to believe can be a variation of, well, the Bible is the exact word of God, or maybe God's word is law, or God is truth is another one. You know, there's different kind of variations there. And of course, that's not an assumption I make, because I think their version of God is a cultural institution. First of all, I don't think that there's any reason to think that it's beyond that. But also, like, if you start to go down that road, there's other things that just don't make sense as conclusions. Again, you just like if we were talking about the problems of morality, just like we were talking about problems of knowledge, right? You still have these same issues if you follow it long enough. Of course, precepts don't care about that. Most of them just want to get their script across, right? So
Right.
it is kind of annoying.
I just
so
think you can actually compare presuppositions.
yeah,
And
yeah,
as
you can.
say, I mean,
Yeah.
Occam's razor, even,
Sure.
you know, just like, okay, the amount of stuff you're presupposing in most theistic presuppositions are so much more densely complicated than just presupposing that you exist, that you're not a
Yeah.
brain in a vat.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'll let you guys go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks.
Mike, for calling in and talking about that. Good conversation so far. I'm enjoying the show, Jimmy. What do you think? You having a good time?
I'm having a great time. I really am. Thank
Great.
you.
I'm
Thank you
so
for
happy.
having me. This is
I'm
awesome.
so glad that you're here with me. But before we keep having our conversations, I have a few quick announcements I need to get out of the way. One, of course, is the one I previously mentioned about our Patreon. If you like this show, you want to tell the ACA, hey, this is a show worth supporting, you can go to tiny.cc/PatreonTW. And there's a couple different tiers there. Of course, one of them, you can get your name shouted out as our patron of the week if you donate. You can also support the show by becoming a member. If you want to do that, you get emojis in the chat. If you're watching this live, your name gets highlighted, and you can also be immune to chat timeouts, all for as little as 99 cents a month. So that's pretty cool. And of course, all of you know by now that our store is up and running again, and we've been featuring a special limited edition item each month. This month's t-shirt is someone being abducted by aliens, and it says, "Truth wanted, always keep wanting the truth." And I think it's great. I've been saying that. This is a funny conversation I had, because I've been saying that phrase for so long. I had a conversation with somebody at the ACA recently who reminded me that that's like a grammatically incorrect thing to say. But like I'm just so used to hearing it, I just kind of forgot. Like, oh yeah, that was kind of the joke in the first place, is that it's not really a proper grammar, but it's funny to say. But like I just accepted it as I don't know, as a thing. So anyway, that's our t-shirt. Check that out if you haven't already. And of course, all of our other merchandise is there as well. And last but not least, if you want to hear our content in audio only form, if you like me and you like to listen to stuff while doing other things, you can listen to this show and others at tiny.cc/AEN podcast for all of the latest ACA shows. So check that out if you haven't already. And now we're going to keep going. We're going to talk to Tim, who's calling in from Texas. Tim, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hello.
Hello, Tim.
Hey,
How
Tim.
are you?
Hello. Wait. Hello. Uh-oh.
Hello. Hello. You're live. What's going on?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Check. Why am I
Tim,
not
can you
coming
hear us?
through?
Oh no. Oh no, Tim. I'm gonna put you on mute. Sorry, not mute. I'm gonna return you to the queue here, and let you talk with our crew behind the scenes to make sure we got your audio right, because we want to have a conversation with you. And folks, we got open lines tonight. It's so funny because some shows some shows you guys are just dying to talk to me, and I can't even get to all the calls before the end of the show. And today we got a lot of open lines, so it's just gonna be free form. We're free forming a little bit with me and Jimmy Jr. Live on the scene. So Jimmy, now this is the time for us to pick a topic. Pick a topic, any topic, Jimmy. What do you think? What's going on? What's on your
Let's
heart?
talk about, a lot of people call in and they say that they saw an unidentified flying object.
Oh man.
And I want to say, congratulations. That was an aptly named description.
That's right. That's right.
It was unidentified. It was flying. It was definitely an object. That's it. Let's just stop there.
Listen, let me tell you something. There is an expedition that's being planned right now by, I believe it's a Harvard professor. I think it's either Harvard or Oxford, to go to a meteorite in a part of the world, because they believe that this meteorite may potentially be a probe that came from an intergalactic object. Basically, there was an object that came into the solar system. Okay, and we don't typically observe that. We found an object that came into the solar system and and this space object came to Earth, right?
Yes.
As part of it. Have you heard about this?
So I don't, is this the same story about the object that came and it's potentially the object responsible for releasing the UAPs or unexplained aerial phenomena?
The idea is that this interstellar object could basically be the result
mothership
of an ancient, the object, the interstellar object could be a mothership, right? Could be a mothership, but the thing that thing that broke from that object and came to Earth would be a probe, is what is expected. So that's happening. That's happening this year. So look out for that. And the guy said that, yeah, they want to release the results of whatever they find on this thing to the public. So, next few years, we could have real evidence of aliens, which would be cool. But
I heard an assessment just in the news. Somebody said that the object, the mothership, couldn't possibly have life on it. So that they were, maybe some kind of mechanical or non-life forms on that ship. I don't even know how we would know that, or how that how that assessment was formed, but I'm interested to find out more.
Yeah, this is here. I found the story here, and we'll get to our call. I have word that our caller is ready. I'm getting it from space.com. Nice. Alien mothership lurking in our solar system could be watching us with tiny probes. Pentagon officials suggest a draft paper by a Harvard scientist and the head of the Pentagon's U.F.O. office has raised the idea an alien mothership could be in the solar system, sending out tiny probes dubbed dandelion seeds to explore the planets within. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about here.
So that is not on behalf of the Pentagon, though.
No,
that should be a distinction.
It is not an official Pentagon document. It was carried out in partnership with the Department of Defense, but it has not been peer reviewed yet. Okay, and this is an astronomer from Harvard University who's talking about this. So that's what's going on. So look, you want to talk about real shit. You want to talk about real shit. That's some real shit right there. Okay, listen, I'm on the beat. All right, I'm watching. When we get the real shit, this show is gonna be the first to talk about it. Okay, that's what you get by going to Truth Wanted, folks. All right, Atheist Experience, they ain't gonna talk about this. Talk Heathen, nah. Nonprofits, maybe they're a news show, but Truth Wanted, we're here. We're on the cutting edge, baby. We're gonna see them aliens, and I'm gonna talk to those aliens and get them to be a guest on this show. That's what's gonna happen. So
they're probably listening right now.
I hope so. I mean, they should be. I'll say that much.
Heard it here first.
So Tim, we're gonna talk to you again. I'm told that we've got some audio issues fixed. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
Perfect. Welcome, Tim. You're live on Truth Wanted. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
I'm doing fantastic. Great. What did you want to talk to us about today?
So I got 3 short stories for you.
3.
They all, so they all share a common theme. Dreams so real you confuse them with reality.
Been there before. That's the worst. I hate
and
those
these,
dreams.
And these, oh yeah. These are 3 of my own personal dreams that I'm going to share with you. So, first one, I guess it could be also like a ghost story, but after thinking about it for a while, I've decided it's most likely a dream. But I'm in my room, going to sleep, and I know my door is locked. I'm the only person in my room, and I usually have music playing in the background, at like a low level. And as I'm going to sleep, I start hearing what sounds like someone walking behind me, like in my room. I have hardwood floors, and I can clearly hear someone walking, like, and I'm starting to freak out. Like I just immediately like freaking out, and then I hear someone talking to me. And at the time, like I could kind of understand what he was saying, but I couldn't tell you what he said now, except for the very last thing. He yelled out my roommate's last name. I don't know if I say it on air or not, but like that matters.
No.
But I hear the
Definitely not.
the ghost
Definitely
clearly yell
not.
out.
If you ever,
I,
here's a pro tip for you, Tim. If you ever have the chance to blurt anybody's real names out on the internet, you should never do it. That's a pro tip for you.
Yeah, sure. So anyways, I hear the entity or whatever yell out my roommate's last name, and then it's just, and from that point on, it's quiet. And then maybe 30 seconds later, I'm just hearing music like normal. And so that's the first story, basically.
Okay.
And
I mean,
yeah.
Can we crack into the first one before we move on?
Let's crack into it, because first of all, Jimmy's face while you're telling this story, Tim, is fucking hilarious. I gotta say, I know
I'm
you're
sorry.
listening. Jimmy's like, what's going on? Jimmy doesn't know. I'm curious too, Tim. Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy. Tim,
don't take my facial expressions. This is the way I always look. It's not an insult towards you. I have a very intense thinking face. I can't shake it. Tim, so do you believe that there was actually somebody there with you, or what do you think?
Let's see. When this happened, I was probably roughly 18, 19 years old. This is like, oh god, like 20 years ago.
Yeah, but do you believe it was true? Do you believe that there was a spirit or another being of some sort in the room with you?
At the time, yes. At the time, yes.
At the time, yes.
At the house I lived in. Oh, the house I lived in.
Okay, because.
Was definitely I have multiple stories I could tell you from people who have lived at that house about ghost stories. Like people who have lived here were convinced this place was haunted. The last name that was yelled out, there's brothers. There's 3 of them, and they have stories about being haunted. They used to live in England before they moved to America, and they have stories of the spirits like affecting them in England, and then when they moved to America,
all right,
it seems to follow them.
Entertain me for a second, though. So you move into this house, right? You already have heard these stories about voices and names being shouted out. And then when it happens to you, it's dark. Your body's getting ready to rest. There's some soothing music playing. You're probably really tired. You're walking, and you hear noises as if somebody's walking, right? It's not as if you were laying in bed and you heard somebody walking. You were walking, and you heard noises. You heard footsteps. I mean, is it possible that maybe you have conditioned yourself? Maybe at the time you had conditioned yourself to also kind of just pick up those things that were planted in your head, those thoughts, those preconceived notions, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think Tim, you don't. I think Tim doesn't. I think Tim believes. Tim views it as a skeptic now, right? Tim, you don't actually think you were haunted or anything, right?
Correct. Like I think about it now, and
okay.
I have one thing that I can kind of like, I guess explain what happened. If I could like think of it like on a like if there was no ghost, what else could it have been, right?
Sure.
And so I think about the playlist that I had at the time, that I listen to, and there was one. I guess you would call it you probably wouldn't call it a skit because it's not a skit. But the band Typo Negative, they have sometimes in between songs they have like a something that's not a song. Sorry, I don't know how to explain it, but it's not a skit. It's not like funny or anything. But anyways, this one very particular one has, you can hear somebody walking, and at the very end of this thing, this person who is walking around ends up like screaming. So I'm thinking I heard that and just was like half asleep. And all of the stories that I keep on hearing about the house, and at the time I just believed that spirits were real. I just combined it all together. There's a ghost behind my bed.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Just from this.
And you were young. I mean, 18 by law is is an adult, but you're still young. I mean, you're not, your brain is not done. You're not, you're certainly are done forming. Your thoughts are not done forming, and you certainly have a lot of experiences to come in life at the age of 18. So what was the turning point for you? What made you say, all right, I don't believe this anymore. Now I'm a skeptic.
I was about, when did Passion of the Christ come out?
2004?
2004? Okay, so I'd have been about 19-ish. I actually had a conversation with a Christian, with a guy I worked with, and we got to talking about gods. And by this time, I was already an atheist, but I believed ghosts were real. Like, just believe that they're true. Okay, guys, they're just true.
Sure.
Okay.
But I was having a conversation with this guy, and he brought up this point of it's like, okay, well, if you don't believe in God, he's a spirit, but you're sitting here telling me you believe in ghosts and spirits. So how come you can't believe in God? And it was pretty much almost at that moment, I just dropped everything spiritual.
That's funny.
Anything
Tim, you know how funny that is? Yeah, because he was like, how come you don't believe in God? And you're like, I'm actually going to go the other way and just drop everything. That's really funny.
So, but Tim, you think ghosts are real?
No, he did, though. He doesn't think of anymore. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
100% believed ghosts were real. Like,
okay.
There's no question about it until I just had this conversation with this guy. And he made me realize, like, well, yeah, I guess that's true. Like, if God's supposed to be like a spirit guy, and I don't believe in him, well, then I guess I just don't believe in other spirits. And from that point, anything considered magical thinking, to me, is just like, all right, cool. If I can file it under magical thinking, then if you want me to believe in it, you gotta work with me and try to make me, like, help me believe it. What, can you help
I think you subconsciously just like realized that there was some bullshit going on, right? Somebody just sat there and said, "Hey, God's a spirit," and your first thought has to be, "How the hell do you know that? How do you know?"
Yeah.
Right? And it trickle down on you. You let it all go. Congratulations.
Yeah, I guess congratulations is in order for that. But no, Tim, that's funny because I think a lot of people do, like, as you're talking about it, it is making me think about how people kind of view their religious experiences in the same way that they view their ghost experiences, which is like, oh, I had a freaky thing happen at a hotel I stayed at once, and some people are like, yeah, I felt really good in a church service once, so that's like the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? It's like it's the exact same kind of evidence for both kinds of claims, right? Which is really funny to think about. I think there's a parallel for sure. Cool. All right, well, Tim, we'll go ahead and let you go, but thanks so much for sharing. I know you had some other stories, but we do gotta get things wrapped up here on our end, unfortunately. But then maybe next time you can tell some more stories about the life and adventures and dreams of Tim. Thanks again for calling in. I will say, most of the time when people tell me, "Oh man, here's a crazy thing that happened in my dream," I'm just like, ugh, whatever. But you know what? We tied it in, we made it relevant, and you know what? That's That's what it's all about, baby. Because dreams, here's a weird thought, Jimmy. Here's something I was thinking about. Okay. So like I watch movies, right? I play video games. I consume visual media, right? And sometimes I read books. Well, I read books, but I only read pretty much nonfiction books now. I can't. I think the last time I read a fiction book actually was Ready Player One, which is funny to say out loud. But yeah, I only read nonfiction books. So before, movies, before TV, before all that, with people like 1,000 years ago, when you only had books and pictures in books, what were people's dreams typically like? Because my dreams usually involve stuff I've seen from video games and movies and TV shows, right? And like things I've seen. You think like their dreams were like way substantively different than ours, like just people? I don't know. Well, I guess there's people today that don't watch shit, so I don't know.
I think their brains just regurgitated their environment just like
Yeah.
ours do.
Yeah.
You know, I took this medieval history course in college, and it's amazing the amount of people who had dreams throughout the Middle Ages where an angel or a god or spirit came to them. And you got to think this was their entire being, right?
Yeah.
This was their entire society. That was like the priest was like the most important person they saw. Everything their parents told them probably had to relate to God or in some way, shape, or form. So for them to be dreaming these things, and then what I would be interested to know is, are accounts of religious dreams less likely nowadays? Or
I don't know. Because
that would be something I'd be interested in learning about.
That's a good question. Because like I think people are broadly identifying as more spiritual rather than just like religious, right? So maybe they'll have spiritual interpretations to their dreams, but it may not necessarily reflect an organized religion's interpretation of what a dream would be, right? So like there might be that element to it, but that's a good research question, Jimmy. I think you should write another master's thesis on that topic.
I don't know, man.
So while you're thinking about contemplating you're doing that, I need to give a couple more announcements here as we're wrapping up the show. I want to let you guys know you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org to do that, and you should reach out at tv@atheist-community.org as well. And of course, if you want to know what's going on in the community, you can go to our website. It's atheist-community.org. And of course, there is a Facebook group, and it's run by fans for fans. So you can go to tiny.cc/FBTWG to interact with other people, talk about the show, say what you like, what you didn't like, talk about how weird Dan looked, and all kinds of whatever you want on there. It's fine. It's fan run. You just have to listen to whatever the mods say, and it's all good fun over there. So check that out if you're on Facebook. If you've ever said to yourself, I really like the content the ACA makes, but I wish there was a way I could get it all the time. Well, I've got the announcement for you, because there is now a 24/7 live stream of the Atheist Experience that is on the official Atheist Experience channel, from all the clips and specials of the over 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. You gotta understand, Atheist Experience has been going on since like the 90s. It is crazy how long it has gone on. Most shows have not had the runtime of the Atheist Experience. We've got the public access clips when it was on public access television for you to watch, and it's on that channel. You can talk to other people in that live chat as well. You can watch or just listen to your favorite hosts from the past and discover some hosts you've never heard of. So you can visit tiny.cc/AXPTV and join in on the fun. And of course, there's the newer clips as well, but I want to emphasize the old stuff is just great to watch. Oh goodness, it's just fun to see the difference in the times. So I want to give a special thanks to you, Jimmy, for being on the show. Thanks so much for joining me today. If people want to find you, are you out there on the social media? Can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm active sometimes and not so active other times, but Jimmy_Jr_New York. Again, I just want to, raise the point for military members out there and veterans alike. If you're not comfortable with the services that are being provided you by the military, although I think you should take advantage of them if it's a difference between you getting help and you not getting help. at least find guidance there. But if not, there are associations out there, such as the Military Association of Atheists and Free Thinkers. And so look them up, browse, see if they have something for you. But I really am super excited that I got to do a show with you, Dan. I think you're a really bright mind. Every time you talk, you get me to kind of think about what my own thoughts are. I might even go vegan. I have to have a talk with my wife after this. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to make light of it, but we've talked about it for a while. We're like, we kind of got to get off this meat. And it happens pretty frequently. So yeah, but great show, dude. Thanks you so much for having me and including me. And
Thank you,
just
Jimmy.
ask me what I think.
My vegan evangelicalism is successful. I'm glad my missionary work has been really paying off today.
Yeah.
So very, very happy about that. Real quickly, also, I need to give a quick shout out to somebody who donated a super chat. It's T. Atkinson, who didn't leave a message, but did give us $2. So thank you so much for the super chat. And thanks again to everybody who donates in all the different ways that you do. And Jimmy, I had a great time with you today. I hope we can do it again in the future.
Likewise.
And without forgetting, because last week our hosts did forget, but this week I'm not going to forget. We have to thank the wonderful, fantastic, amazing, stupendous crew that helped make this show happen every single week. There's that crew cam that should be at the end of every single show. Come on, Kelly. Come on, Ben. These guys forgot last week, but that's okay. I don't forget. Okay, that's not true. I've definitely forgotten crew cam before, but not today. All right, not today, especially after last week. Because oh man, the shit you get. Okay, the shit you get as a host behind the scenes if you forget crew cam, you never live it down. You never live it down. They're like elephants. They never forget. Okay. But of course, thanks to everybody who gave your answers last week for the We Want the Truth segment. This week's prompt again, wrong answers only. What is the real cause of climate change? Comment below and we'll read next week's top 3 answers. We're going to wrap things up tonight. We're going to be on the after show Discord in just a second, the Discord after show. So follow the links to that in the description and also in the chat on the ACD Fan Run Discord, and we'll be there in just a second. But for now, I'm going to sign off for tonight. That's it, everybody. I am Objectively Dan, and remember to always keep wanting the truth. I'll see you later.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between The Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.